We need 2 million in shares.
You ignored me for 15 years and now treat me like a bank?
Stop being dramatic and sign. You didn't come to reconnect, you came to collect. 15 years of erasing me, here's the proof.
You always craved attention.
No. I crave family, you craved a scapegoat.
Watch your tone.
After everything, you'd still shut us out? You didn't raise me, you used me. The bank is closed.
I'm Ava, 38, and I'm the CEO of a tech empire I built from absolute scratch. Standing here on the terrace of my $15 million mansion overlooking Silicon Valley should have been a moment of peace, a final testament to escaping a past that never wanted me. But then my doorbell rang. It was them, the family that hadn't spoken a word to me in 15 years. After 5 minutes of awkward hellos, my father looked me dead in the eye and said, "We need a $2 million loan and some shares in your company." The sheer nerve of it didn't break me. It forged me. And they had no idea I'd spent years preparing for this exact conversation. If you've ever felt like an outsider in your own home, let me know where you're watching from. And hit that like and subscribe button, because you're going to want to see what happens when they finally meet the CEO. So, after I packed up my beat-up Honda Civic and said goodbye to Chicago, I landed in San Francisco with nothing but a computer science degree and a mountain of student loan debt. The plan? Survive, thrive, and, most importantly, never need them again. My first job wasn't glamorous. It was a tech support gig at a small software company. My job was to answer phones and listen to people scream about why their software was broken. "Hello, Secure Now, this is Ava, how can I help you?" That was my mantra for 8 hours a day. I listened to people cuss me out. I listened to people cry. I listened to people just plain confused. It wasn't exactly using my degree, but it was a paycheck. And let me tell you, those paychecks were critical. But every night, after clocking out, I went home and went back to work. I knew I had to get out of tech support. I knew I could do more. I knew I had to build something. So I dove headfirst into learning everything I could about cybersecurity. The internet became my university. Programming languages, encryption protocols, security vulnerabilities. I soaked it all up. Sleep? Nah, sleep was for the weak. Coffee? That was my fuel. I'd pound back energy drinks and work until my eyes burned, until the sun came up. "You're overqualified for this position, Ava," my supervisor said during my 3-month review. "But I appreciate your work ethic. Keep it up, and there will be opportunities for advancement." Advancement in tech support? No, thanks. I was building my own advancement. I was building my own damn future. Then came the hackathon. It was a local event at Berkeley, and I decided to take a shot. I'd been working on an idea for a new approach to data protection, something that went beyond passwords, something that could actually stop the bad guys. During the event, I had a team working with me, and our product was one of the top 3. The hackathon was when I met Diana Chen. Diana was a professor, and she was brilliant. She saw something in me, the way I saw the problem of security. The weak link wasn't technology, it was people. And she took me under her wing. She gave me advice. She connected me with people. And she told me, point blank, "Ava, you have a unique perspective. You think differently." With Diana's guidance, I kept developing my concept. I had a prototype, but it wasn't enough. I needed money. So I started pitching my idea to investors. Let me tell you, getting a venture capitalist to listen to a woman, let alone a young woman with no track record. Brutal. 27 investors. 27 rejections. "Interesting idea," they'd say, "but we invest in people with experience." Or, the killer, "Come back when you have a working prototype." Rejection after rejection. Sound familiar? It was just like my family. "You're not good enough. You'll never be successful." Those voices echoed in my head. I started to wonder if they were right. Then I was hit with a medical bill. To keep my head above water, I took a second job bartending at a trendy bar in the city. It was a techie hangout, so I got to meet a lot of cool people, and I was able to save money. It was hard work, but it paid the bills, and it also gave me a chance to network. One night, I was talking to a guy named Travis about the future of digital privacy. He was interested. He asked questions. He pushed back. And week after week, the conversations continued. Then he told me he was an angel investor who specialized in cybersecurity startups. "I've been testing you, Ava," he admitted, "to see if you really know your stuff, or if you're just another person with big talk and no substance. You are the real deal. Let me see your business plan." 2 weeks later, he gave me a check for $200,000. $200,000. My jaw hit the floor. It wasn't a huge amount, but it was enough. Enough to quit that soul-crushing tech support job. Enough to finally focus on building my own damn company. Secure Now was officially born. I rented a small office. I hired a few people. And I worked, and worked, and worked. I'm not kidding. I was there before anyone else, and I was always the last to leave. I'd run the company, make sure everything was running smoothly. My days bled into nights. Coffee became my blood. Sleep became a luxury I barely afforded. I lived on ramen noodles. I bought my clothes from thrift stores. But every single sacrifice was worth it. My family, meanwhile, they had no idea. To them, I was still just Ava from California with some job. Ethan would call, Chloe would text. Their conversations were always the same. "How's the job, Ava?" Or, "What are you up to?" They never asked about the real Ava. They never knew what I was really up to. They didn't know about the long hours, the sleepless nights, the constant struggle. They didn't see the sweat and the sacrifices. They didn't see what I was building. And, honestly, I liked it that way. It was my secret, my weapon. They had dismissed me for so long. They underestimated me for so long. They thought they knew everything about me. Now they wouldn't be seeing what I was building until the time was right. They never saw it coming. With Diana's guidance and Travis's backing, we started to refine my prototype. We developed a working version of my behavioral authentication system. We started testing it. And then, a miracle happened. Secure Now began to get noticed. Our system was groundbreaking. We started to make headlines. Big tech publications started to pay attention. I was no longer just answering phones. I was becoming a leader in cybersecurity. My team grew. Our first product was launched. And we started to see some serious traction. Within 6 months, we had licensing agreements with 3 Fortune 500 companies. But the biggest moment came in the office. A week after the first product was released, I got the news. I had just secured my first major contract, a $5 million deal with a global financial firm. The meeting was a blur of handshakes and high fives. My team was ecstatic. Everyone was ecstatic. The energy in the room was electric. And I knew, finally, that I had built something truly amazing. I had proven that I could do it. I could build a business. I could build a life. And for the first time in a long, long time, I had a small smile. I had my own damn life, on my own terms. But little did I know that my real success, my ultimate weapon, was still a secret that my family, with their endless need, would soon stumble upon. I smiled. A secret is about to blow up in their faces. The call that changed everything came on a Tuesday afternoon. It was my grandmother, Helen. She was the only person in my family who ever truly saw me. The only one who told me I was special, that I had a spark. Her voice on the phone was weak, a faint whisper that barely carried across the country. "Ava, darling," she said, and I could hear the effort in her breath. "I'm so proud of the woman you've become. So proud." I tried to keep my voice steady, telling her about my work, about the small victories at my new company. I didn't tell her about the struggles, about the ramen noodle dinners or the tiny apartment I shared with two strangers. I just wanted her to hear a success story. A few days later, she was gone. After that call, a strange quiet settled over my family. I knew my grandmother's health was failing, but the silence from my parents and siblings was unnatural. It was a heavy, loaded silence that felt like the air before a thunderstorm. I had this gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach, a sense of dread that I couldn't shake. I told myself I was just being paranoid, that I was just grieving. I was wrong. The storm was coming, and it was about to wash away every last illusion I had about the people I called family. I flew back to Chicago for the funeral, my heart a leaden weight in my chest. The service was a blur of unfamiliar faces and empty condolences. I sat alone, while my parents, my brother Ethan, and my sister Chloe huddled together, a perfect portrait of a grieving family. Not once did they look my way. Not once did they ask if I was okay. It was as if I were a ghost at my own grandmother's funeral. Later that day, we all gathered at my parents' house for the reading of the will. I found a quiet corner in the living room, trying to make myself as small as possible. When the lawyer began to read, most of it was predictable. The house went to my mother, the car to Ethan, the jewelry to Chloe. Then he got to a special provision. To my beloved granddaughter Ava, he read, his voice echoing in the silent room, I leave my grandmother's ruby ring and the sum of $5,000. You were always special to me, and I know you will make me proud. The air crackled with tension. My mother let out a small, derisive scoff. $5,000? And that old ring? That's it? Her words were like a slap in the face. I hadn't expected anything, and the gesture from my grandmother, a woman who had so little, meant the world to me. The ring was a family heirloom. It was priceless. My father's face turned a dangerous shade of red. This is an outrage, he sputtered. Helen always did favor Ava for some reason. For some reason. That was when I found my voice. Maybe because she was the only one in this family who ever showed me any kindness. I said, my own voice trembling with a mix of grief and anger. And then, the dam broke. Years of resentment, of unspoken truths, of bitter poison came rushing out. You want to talk about kindness? My father shouted, his voice booming. We took you in when no one else would. We gave you a home, an education, and opportunities most kids could only dream of. And this is the gratitude we get? I was completely bewildered. Took me in? What are you talking about? My mother shot him a warning look, but it was too late. The damage was done. The secret was out. You're not even our daughter, he spat, the words dripping with venom. We adopted you when you were 2 years old after your mother died. She was your mother's college roommate, got herself killed in a car accident. No father in the picture, no other family willing to take you. So we did. Out of the goodness of our hearts. The room started to spin. Adopted. It couldn't be real. I looked at my mother, silently pleading with her to deny it, to say he was lying, that he was just angry. But she just sighed, a tired, defeated sound. We were going to tell you when you were older, she said softly, but then it never seemed like the right time. 23 years. 23 years. And it was never the right time to tell me the truth about my own life. All those years of feeling like I didn't belong, like an outsider looking in. It all suddenly made a terrible, gut-wrenching kind of sense. So I've been living a lie my entire life, I whispered, the words barely audible. Does everyone know except me? Chloe shrugged, a casual, dismissive gesture that cut me deeper than any knife. Most of the family knows, she said. It wasn't exactly a secret. We just didn't talk about it. Not a secret to anyone but me, the person whose life it was. I felt sick to my stomach. Ethan, ever the golden boy, chimed in, more concerned about the inheritance than my shattered reality. Why did Grandma Helen leave the ring to Ava anyway? He asked the lawyer. It should stay with the Blood family. Blood family. Those two words echoed in my ears. The lawyer cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. Mrs. Helen specifically stated that Ava should have the ring because, in her words, true family is about love, not blood. That set my father off again. That old woman always did try to undermine our parenting, he roared, filling Ava's head with nonsense, making her think she was special when we were trying to raise her to be realistic about her place in the world. My place? I asked, my voice rising, finally cracking. And what exactly is my place in this family? You should be grateful we took you in at all, Chloe interjected, her voice sharp and cruel. Do you know how many orphans end up in the system? You had privileges most of them could only dream of. I stared at her, seeing her, really seeing her, for the first time. Privileges? I shot back. Like being constantly reminded that I wasn't as good as you or Ethan? Like having my birthdays forgotten and my achievements ignored? Those kinds of privileges? See? My mother said, her voice dripping with condescension. This is exactly why we never told you. We knew you would react emotionally instead of rationally. Finding out my entire life has been a lie seems like a reasonable thing to be emotional about, I retorted, my voice shaking with rage. My father stood up, towering over the table. That is enough, he commanded. I will not have you speaking to your mother that way under my roof. If you cannot show some gratitude for everything we have done for you, then perhaps you should leave. I looked around the table at the cold, unforgiving faces of the people I had called my family. Not one of them met my eyes. Not one of them defended me. In that moment, I made a decision. A decision that would change the course of my life forever. Fine, I said, my voice eerily calm. I stood up, gathered my purse. I'll go. I walked out of that house, out of that life, and I never looked back. 6 months later, I was in San Francisco, living on the edge, pouring every ounce of my energy and the last of my grandmother's $5,000 into my fledgling company. I was running on fumes, fueled by coffee and sheer, unadulterated rage. One night, a searing pain ripped through my abdomen. It was so intense, I collapsed on the floor of my tiny apartment. My roommate, a nurse, found me and called 911. Acute appendicitis. I was rushed into emergency surgery. I woke up alone in a sterile white room, the beep of the heart monitor the only sound. The pain was immense, but it was nothing compared to the fear. I was uninsured. The bill for this would be astronomical. Tens of thousands of dollars. It would be enough to bury me, to crush the fragile new life I was trying to build. In a moment of pure, undiluted desperation, I did the one thing I swore I would never do. I called home. My mother answered. Hello? Her voice was clipped, impatient. Mom, it's me, Ava, I whispered, my voice hoarse from the anesthesia. I'm in the hospital. I just had surgery. There was a long, cold silence on the other end of the line. We told you not to contact us, she said finally, her voice devoid of any warmth, any concern. What do you want? I don't want anything. I lied, shame and humiliation washing over me. I thought you should know. I heard a muffled voice in the background, my father's gruff tone. Let me talk to her, he demanded. He snatched the phone. Listen here, he said, his voice laced with suspicion. How do we know this isn't some kind of scam to get money out of us? Did you finally burn through that $5,000? The cruelty of his words hit me with the force of a physical blow. It hurt more than the incision. more than anything I had ever felt. They didn't see a daughter in pain. They didn't see a child who was scared and alone. They saw a con artist, a liability, an inconvenience. "Never mind," I whispered, and I hung up the phone. The tears that came were not tears of sadness. They were tears of pure, white-hot fury. Something inside of me snapped. The last fragile thread connecting me to them was severed. They weren't my family. They were just people I used to know. People who had left me to die. And in that moment, in that cold, lonely hospital bed, a new resolve hardened within me. They wanted to treat me like a stranger? Fine. I would become the most successful stranger they had ever known. I would build an empire so vast, a fortune so immense, that one day they would look at me and see nothing but the reflection of their own monumental mistake. And that's when I realized, after all the years of pain, that the family had left me for dead in the most cruel way possible. I honestly don't know what word to use to describe what I'm feeling right now. If you're as angry as I am right now, help me out and comment one word to describe what this family did. But instead of breaking, that rage became a cold, hard fuel. Hanging up that phone felt final. There were no tears, no screaming into a pillow. The raging fire of fury from the hospital had cooled, hardened into something else. Something cold, quiet, and unbreakable. It was like watching a building collapse in slow motion. You see the cracks forming, you hear the groaning of stressed steel, but you keep hoping it will hold. And then, in one clean, catastrophic moment, the entire structure gives way, leaving nothing but dust and a chilling silence. That was what happened inside of me. The hope I'd secretly harbored, the childish belief that one day they would see me, that they would finally be proud. It all just crumbled. It's better for the family. My mother's words echoed in the silence of my apartment. Better for the family. My success was an inconvenience. My presence was a problem. I wasn't a daughter to be celebrated. I was a variable to be managed, a potential disruption to their carefully curated image of a perfect, happy family. They didn't punish me for my failures. They were punishing me for my success. And in that moment, I understood with a terrifying clarity that it was never about me. It was never about whether I was good enough, or smart enough, or successful enough. The game was rigged from the start. I could never win, because they had already decided I wasn't allowed to play. Enough. The word settled in my mind, not with a shout, but with the quiet finality of a judge's gavel. Enough. There would be no next time, no more chances, no more extending my hand only to have it slapped away. They will never change. That was the cold, hard truth I had been running from my entire life. And accepting it didn't break me. It freed me. The pain was still there, a dull phantom ache where a family used to be. But it was no longer a weakness. It was fuel. A cold, clean, high-octane fuel for the engine I was building. I didn't storm out. I didn't make a scene. That's what they would have expected. The emotional daughter, just like they always said. No. I withdrew. I retreated into the one place where I had complete control. My work. My apartment. Once just a place to crash between shifts, became my fortress of solitude. My laptop. My shield. The first thing I did was open my travel app and cancel the first-class flight to Chicago. The confirmation email popped up. A small, satisfying ping of finality. Then I looked at the receipt for the wedding gift I'd bought for Ethan and his fiancée. An exquisite, handcrafted silver flatware set from Tiffany's. A gift that cost more than my first car. A peace offering. An olive branch. I took a picture of it. Then I found the website for a local charity that helped furnish homes for families escaping domestic violence. I filled out the donation form, attached the picture, and sent it off. Let someone who truly needed a fresh start have it. My actions from that point on were methodical, calculated, devoid of emotion. I was a CEO executing a strategic pivot. The product? My life. The objective? Absolute, unassailable independence. I didn't just want success anymore. I wanted an empire. I wanted to build walls so high, a fortress so impenetrable that their toxicity could never reach me again. I called my financial advisor. David, I said, my voice even, I want to restructure my portfolio. I want to shift everything towards aggressive growth. Maximum risk, maximum reward. He was hesitant, advising caution. I wasn't interested in caution. Caution was for people who had something to lose. I had already lost everything that was supposed to matter. Next, I called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but the best corporate lawyer in San Francisco. I need to set up a series of trusts and an ironclad LLC, I explained. I want my assets to be completely insulated, untouchable. He asked if I was anticipating a lawsuit. No, I replied. I'm anticipating family. And then I went to work. But it was a different kind of work now. The frantic, desperate energy of my early days was gone. In its place was a relentless, laser-focused drive. Every line of code I wrote, every meeting I led, every deal I closed was a brick in my fortress. I stopped seeing my job as a career. I saw it as a weapon. Every dollar Secure Now earned, every patent we filed, every market we cornered, was another stone in the catapult aimed squarely at the life that had cast me out. I became a ghost in my personal life. Friendships faded. Dating was a non-starter. My entire existence was poured into the company. My team noticed the shift. Ava, you need to take a break. My CTO, Layla, would say, you're going to burn yourself out. But they didn't understand. I wasn't burning out. I was forging myself in the fire. Every 16-hour day, every skipped meal, every lonely night spent staring at a computer screen was an act of rebellion, an act of creation. The company exploded. Our behavioral authentication system became the new industry standard. We landed massive contracts with international banks, government agencies, and other tech giants. My face started appearing on the covers of business magazines. The security queen. The woman who built a digital fortress. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. I was building digital fortresses for the world, while my own personal fortress was still under construction. With the influx of capital, my life changed dramatically. I moved out of my small apartment and into a luxury condo overlooking the bay. I bought a Tesla. I traded my thrift store clothes for designer suits. It wasn't about vanity. It was about armor. It was about walking into a boardroom and commanding respect before I even opened my mouth. It was about creating an image of power and success so overwhelming that no one would ever dare to question my worth again. And through it all, my family remained blissfully unaware. As far as they knew, I was still just Ava from California. The magazines, the articles, the billion-dollar valuation of my company. It was all happening in a world they didn't inhabit, a world they couldn't even comprehend. I made sure of it. I kept my social media profiles private. I used a different last name for my public-facing role at the company, my mother's maiden name. A small, silent act of defiance. They had told me I wasn't a part of their bloodline. Fine. I would build a legacy under a different name. The silence from them was absolute. No calls, no texts, not even a stray Christmas card. It was as if, after that final brutal phone call, I had simply ceased to exist. And that silence. It was the greatest gift they had ever given me. It gave me the space to build, the space to grow, the space to become the person they were so afraid I would become. One rainy afternoon, I was sitting in my office, looking out at the San Francisco skyline, when my assistant buzzed me. "Ava, your father is on the line." I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs. After all these years? Why now? 100 different scenarios flashed through my mind. Was someone sick? Was someone hurt? I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and told her to put him through. "Ava?" His voice was hesitant, unfamiliar. "Hello, John," I said, using his first name. A small, calculated move to establish the new dynamic. "Look, I know it's been a while," he started, stumbling over the words. "But your mother and I were just wondering how you were doing. We saw an article about some company. It had your picture." So that's what it was. They had finally seen. They had finally noticed. "I'm fine," I said, my voice a flat, neutral tone. That's good," he said, clearly flustered. "Listen, the reason I'm calling is, well, things haven't been so great here. The business isn't doing well. And your brother Ethan?" I cut him off. "I have a meeting," I said, my voice like ice. "It was interesting to hear from you." And I hung up. I sat there, staring at the phone, my hand trembling slightly. It was starting. The first crack in their perfect little world. The first sign that they might need something. And as I sat there, a slow, cold smile spread across my face. Let them wonder. Let them worry. Let them see the headlines and speculate about my wealth. They had no idea what was coming. They had created this monster, this cold, calculating CEO. And soon, very soon, they were going to come knocking on my door. And I would be ready. Oh, I would be so, so ready. The day they finally showed up was a quiet Sunday morning. I was in my home office, a vast room with floor-to-ceiling glass walls overlooking the gardens, finalizing the details for a $10 million charity gala I was hosting at the estate. The irony was not lost on me. 15 years to the day after being cast out, here I was, giving away more money than my father had probably ever seen in his life. And then, the chime. The security system, alerting me to visitors at the front gate. I pulled up the camera feed on my tablet, my coffee cup halfway to my lips, and I froze. There they were. Ghosts from a past I had buried under layers of success and steel. My father, John, looked older, smaller, his once confident posture now stooped with an uncertainty I'd never seen before. My mother, Carol, was beside him, clutching her purse like a shield, her face a mask of nervous anticipation. My brother Ethan, heavier now, the golden boy athlete, softened into a doughy middle-aged man. And my sister Chloe was still impeccably dressed, but with a brittle tension around her eyes that even her perfect makeup couldn't hide. She had 2 children with her, a boy and a girl, strangers who were supposedly my niece and nephew. 15 years of absolute silence, and now, here they were, standing at the gates of my $15 million fortress. My first instinct was to press deny access and watch them turn and walk away. But a cold, calculating curiosity won out. What could have brought them here, after all this time? I pressed the button to open the gates. The game was on. I took my time changing, pulling on a simple pair of jeans and a cashmere sweater. I wanted to look effortless, unbothered. By the time the doorbell rang, I had composed myself. I opened the massive front door, and there they stood, gawking at the grand foyer, the marble floors, the sweeping staircase. Their eyes were wide with a mixture of awe and something else. Greed. My mother was the first to speak, stepping forward with her arms outstretched for a hug. "Ava," she said, her voice thick with fake emotion, "you look wonderful." I took a subtle step back, avoiding the embrace. "Thank you," I replied, my voice cool and even, This is unexpected. We've been wanting to reach out for so long, my father chimed in, his voice softer, more conciliatory than I had ever heard it. We saw the article about your charity gala in the Wall Street Journal. We thought it was time to reconnect. The Wall Street Journal. Of course, it wasn't regret that brought them here. It was a balance sheet. I led them into the main living room, a cavernous space with panoramic views of the pool and gardens. The silence was thick with unspoken words, with 15 years of history hanging between us. I offered them coffee, more out of a sense of detached politeness than genuine hospitality. As I went to the kitchen, I leaned against the cold marble countertop, taking a deep breath to steady the tremor in my hands. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times. I had rehearsed 100 different speeches. But now that it was here, I felt a strange sense of calm. The calm of a predator that has just seen its prey walk willingly into the trap. When I returned with a tray of coffee served in my finest porcelain, the performance began. They gushed about the house. They fawned over my success. "We're all so proud," Ethan said, his eyes scanning the original artwork on the walls. Proud. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. "Now you're proud?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Not when I graduated with honors from Stanford, not when I started my company from nothing in a tiny, shared apartment. Only now? Now that there are articles in the Wall Street Journal? Now you proud? An uncomfortable silence descended. Chloe, ever the strategist, tried to change the subject, introducing her children. "This is Jack and Emma," she said, pushing them forward. I nodded at them, these innocent pawns in their parents' desperate game. And then, my father, clearing his throat, finally got to the point. The real reason for this impromptu family reunion. "Ava," he began, the faux warmth evaporating from his voice. "We didn't just come here to reconnect, though that is certainly our hope. We also came because, well, we could use your help." And there it was, the punchline to a 15-year-long joke. He laid it all out. His engineering firm had gone bankrupt. Ethan had been laid off from his tech job and was going through a messy divorce. Chloe's husband had left her for his secretary, and she was drowning in legal bills. The perfect storm of their own making. "We were thinking," he continued, mistaking my silence for consideration, "that perhaps you could help us restart the family business. A loan of about $2 million would allow us to reestablish ourselves and create something the whole family could be a part of." The whole family. The audacity was breathtaking. My mother jumped in, her eyes gleaming with a desperate hope. "Yes, you could be a part of it too, Ava. A silent partner, of course. And perhaps," she added, the true ambition of their plan finally revealed, "you could consider allocating some shares in your company to the family trust. Keep it all in the family, so to speak." Nausea rose in my throat. They didn't just want a handout. They wanted a piece of my empire, a piece of the life I had built on the ashes of the one they had burned down. They wanted to claim a victory they had no part in winning. I let the silence hang in the air for a long, pregnant moment. I watched the hope on their faces curdle into a nervous uncertainty. And then, I smiled. A slow, cold smile that didn't reach my eyes. A smile they had never seen before. "Please," I said, gesturing to the plush leather sofas. "Make yourselves comfortable. We have a lot to catch in on." My voice was light, almost conversational, but underneath it, there was a core of pure, unadulterated steel. I excused myself for a moment and returned with a leather-bound photo album and my laptop. I set them down on the massive oak coffee table with a soft, definitive thud. "Before we discuss any financial arrangements," I began, leaning back, crossing my legs, assuming the same posture I used in my boardroom when I was about to gut a competitor. "I think we should take a trip down memory lane. After all, we're family, right? I opened the album, but it wasn't filled with old family photos. It was filled with screenshots. 15 years of them. This, I said, pointing to the first page, is a Facebook post from Thanksgiving, 3 months after you told me to never contact you again. The caption reads, "So grateful for family. I see all of you are there. Looks like a lovely time." I turn the page. Christmas, birthdays, graduations, Ethan's wedding, Chloe's baby showers, page after page of their perfect, complete family gatherings, all with cheerful captions about having everyone they love in one place, everyone but me. "Why do you have all these?" Chloe asked, her voice strained. "Know your enemy," I replied with a small, chilling smile. "A basic principle of cybersecurity. You taught me that, Dad. Probably the most valuable lesson you ever gave me." I closed the album and opened my laptop. Now, let's move on to our more direct correspondence. I turned the screen towards them, showing an email from my father, dated 12 years ago. I read it aloud, my voice a monotone. "Olivia, I must insist that you cease any attempts to contact family members. Your mother was very upset by your Christmas card. We have moved on with our lives and expect you to respect our privacy." I looked up at him. That was in response to the only Christmas card I ever sent. A simple card. No accusations, no pleas, just a card. And that was your response. He stared at his hands, his face ashen. I kept going, pulling up another email, this one from Chloe to a friend, accidentally CCing me. Ugh, saw another article about my sister, the tech genius. Mom was going on about it all day, as if being rich makes up for being such a freak growing up. Chloe's face flushed a blotchy red. "I didn't mean—" "Oh, I think you did," I interrupted, my voice cutting through her excuses like a surgeon's scalpel. I closed the laptop and leaned forward, my gaze sweeping over each of them, pinning them in place. "For 15 years, you lived your lives as if I did not exist. You celebrated holidays. You shared milestones. You were a family. Just without me. And that was your choice." I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the gardens I had created, the life I had built. Now you come here, to my home, and you talk about family as if it's a coat you can put on whenever it gets cold outside. I turned back to face them, the final act of the play about to begin. "Let me be very clear. You want to talk about family?" I asked, my voice dropping to a near whisper. "Let's talk about family. Do you remember when I was in the hospital? 6 months after you threw me out? When I had emergency surgery for appendicitis and called you, terrified I was going to be buried under $50,000 of medical debt?" I paused, letting the memory sink in. "I remember what you said, Dad. You asked me if it was a scam to get money. Not if I was okay. Not if I was scared. You asked if I was a con artist." The color drained from my father's face. My mother started to sob quietly. "Or how about we talk about Ethan's wedding?" I continued, my gaze shifting to my mother. "Do you remember calling me one day before I was scheduled to fly to Chicago to uninvite me? Do you remember telling me that my success, would make everyone uncomfortable? That it was better for the family if I wasn't there?" I let the words hang in the air, heavy and poisonous. "You didn't just reject me when I was a broken, penniless girl. You rejected me when I was a successful woman. You made it perfectly, painfully clear that there was no version of me, failed or successful, that would ever be welcome in your family." I walked back to the coffee table and stood before them, the judge and jury in the trial of their own making. "So no, I will not be giving you $2 million. I will not be giving you a single share of the company I built with my own blood, sweat, and tears. The company I built despite you, not because of you." I looked at the children, their faces pale and confused. But I will not punish children for the sins of their parents. I told them about the educational trusts I would set up for Jack and Emma. Funds they would control, with no access for their parents. And then, I delivered the final, fatal blow. This meeting is over. I think it's time for you to go. I watched as the reality of their situation, the totality of their failure, finally crashed down upon them. They had come here expecting a lifeline. Instead, they had found a mirror. And the reflection was not a pretty one. For a moment there was just silence. A stunned, disbelieving silence, as if I had just started speaking in a foreign language they couldn't comprehend. They stared at me, their faces a chaotic canvas of shock, confusion, and dawning horror. It was like watching a computer system crash in real time. The logic they had operated on their entire lives, that I was the outsider, the supplicant, the one who should be grateful for any scraps of attention they threw my way, had just encountered a fatal error, and their entire operating system was shutting down. My mother was the first to reboot, her denial kicking in like a faulty antivirus program. "What are you talking about?" she stammered, her carefully constructed composure finally cracking. The fake tears from earlier were now real, streaming down her face. But they weren't tears of remorse. There were tears of panic. "This has to be a joke, Ava, a cruel, cruel joke." "Do I look like I'm joking?" I asked, my voice calm, my expression unreadable. Then came the anger. My father, his face purple with rage, surged to his feet, his chair scraping violently against the marble floor. "After everything we did for you?" he roared, the familiar boom of his voice no longer intimidating, just pathetic. "We gave you a roof over your head. We fed you. We clothed you. And this is how you repay us? By throwing it all back in our faces? You ungrateful, selfish child." Ungrateful. Selfish. The old, familiar weapons. But they had lost their edge. They were like arrows bouncing harmlessly off my armor. Chloe, ever the loyal lieutenant, jumped to his defense. "It's all your fault," she shrieked, her voice rising to a shrill, hysterical pitch. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "You've always been like this. Always so dramatic, so needy, always trying to make everything about you. You just couldn't stand that we were a happy family without you, so you had to come up with this performance to try and ruin it. A happy family without me." She had said the quiet part out loud, and in doing so, she had just confirmed everything I had known to be true. "Ruin it?" I repeated, a small, humorless laugh escaping my lips. "Chloe, you came to my house after 15 years of silence to ask me for $2 million. I think you did a pretty good job of ruining your own happiness long before I said a word." That's when the panic truly set in. The reality of their situation, the fact that their last best hope had just evaporated before their eyes, began to sink in. They were no longer in control. The power dynamic had shifted so completely, so seismically, that the ground beneath their feet had vanished, and they were in free fall. But what are we supposed to do?" Ethan finally stammered, his voice small and childlike. The golden boy, the star athlete, now looked like a lost little boy, completely out of his depth. "My divorce, my kids. I'm going to lose my house." "That sounds like a you problem, Ethan," I said, my voice devoid of sympathy. "Not a me problem. You're a grown man. It's time you started acting like one." The begging started then. A desperate, pathetic cascade of pleading and bargaining. My mother switched tactics, her anger dissolving into a puddle of manipulative tears. "Ava, please," she sobbed, reaching a hand out to me, a gesture I easily sidestepped. "You're our daughter. How can you do this to your own family? I loved you. I swear I did. I loved you like you were my own." I looked her dead in the eye, The woman who had left me to fend for myself in a hospital bed. The woman who had told me my success was an inconvenience. Really? I asked, my voice a blade of ice. You have a funny way of showing it. My father tried a different approach, threats. You think you can just cut us off? He sneered, trying to reclaim some semblance of his old authority. We're your family. We have rights. I'll talk to a lawyer. I'll tell the world what a cold-hearted monster you are. I almost laughed. Go ahead, I said, my voice a challenge. Tell them. Tell them how you threw your adopted daughter out on the street. Tell them how you refused to help her when she was in the hospital. Tell them how you showed up at her door, 15 years later, not with an apology, but with your hand out. Please, John, tell the world. I'm sure the Wall Street Journal would love to hear that story. It would make a fantastic follow-up to my charity gala piece. Checkmate. The blood drained from his face as he realized the catastrophic miscalculation he had just made. He had no power here, no leverage. I held all the cards, and he had just tried to bluff with an empty hand. It was a chaotic, ugly scene, a symphony of desperation. They yelled, they cried, they accused, they begged. They cycled through the 5 stages of grief in a dizzying, pathetic display. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, but acceptance. Acceptance was still a long way off. Chloe's children, Jack and Emma, had been silent observers throughout the entire ordeal, their young faces pale with confusion and fear. Emma started to cry, her small sobs cutting through the toxic haze of the room. That was my cue. This was over. This is not a negotiation, I said, my voice ringing with an authority that silenced the room. My offer of the educational trusts for the children stands. My assistant will be in contact to arrange the details. As for the rest of you, this conversation is finished. I walked to the front door and opened it. The cool afternoon air a welcome relief from the suffocating atmosphere inside. It's time for you to leave. They stumbled out, a defeated, broken parade of shattered expectations. My mother was still sobbing, leaning on my father for support. Ethan looked utterly lost, his face a mask of bewildered despair. Chloe shot me one last look, a look of pure, unadulterated hatred before yanking her children towards the car. As they piled into their modest sedan, a vehicle that looked comically out of place on the pristine cobblestones of my driveway, a strange sense of emptiness washed over me. I had won. I had achieved the victory I had fantasized about for 15 years. I had faced my demons and vanquished them, but there was no elation, no triumphant surge of adrenaline, just a quiet, hollow ache. I closed the door, the heavy thud of the solid oak echoing the finality of the moment. I leaned against it, the cool wood a steady presence against my back, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding for half my life. The aftermath was immediate. My phone started to blow up before their car had even reached the front gate. A barrage of texts, voicemails, missed calls. First came the anger. Vicious, hateful messages from Chloe, calling me every name in the book. Then came the pleading. Long, rambling voicemails from my mother, filled with tears and guilt-tripping non sequiturs. How could you do this to us? After all I've done for you? I gave you a good home. I treated you like my own daughter. Then, the emails started. Long, self-pitying manifestos from my father, detailing all his financial woes, blaming the economy, blaming his competitors, blaming everyone but himself. He accused me of being cold, heartless, of forgetting where I came from. He demanded that I reconsider, that I do the right thing, and help my family. I didn't respond to any of them. I read the texts. I listened to the first few seconds of the voicemails, and I scanned the subject lines of the emails. And then, One by one, I blocked their numbers. I created a filter to send all their emails directly to a trash folder. I was building a digital wall, a firewall against their toxicity. The silence that followed was deafening and beautiful. For the first time in my life, I was truly, completely free. The ghosts of my past had been exorcised. The chains of their approval, chains I didn't even realize I was still wearing, had been shattered. I was alone. But for the first time, it wasn't lonely alone. It was a peaceful alone. The quiet of a battlefield after the war has been won. The fight was over. And I was still standing. I had survived. And now, for the first time, I could finally start to live. After I closed the door, I stood there for a long moment, just breathing. The silence in the house was immense, a stark contrast to the chaotic storm that had just passed through it. The barrage of texts and calls had already started, a pathetic digital assault on the walls I had just erected. But I was done. For the first time in my 38 years, I was truly and completely done. I walked calmly to my office, sat down at my desk, and pulled out my phone. I didn't delete their messages. Deleting felt too emotional, too reactive. Instead, I methodically blocked each of their numbers. John, Carol, Ethan, Chloe. One by one, their digital lifelines to me were severed. It was a simple, quiet act, but it felt more powerful than any screaming match ever could. Then I opened my email and created a new filter. Any email from their known addresses would be automatically, silently, moved to a folder labeled Archive. Not trash. Archive. A cold, digital tomb for their desperate pleas and empty accusations. I wouldn't read them. But they would be there. A record. A reminder of why I had to do this. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about punishing them. It was about survival. It was about declaring, in the clearest terms possible, that their problems were no longer my problems. Their chaos was no longer my chaos. Their self-inflicted wounds were no longer my responsibility to heal. I was drawing a line, not in the sand, but in solid granite. On one side was their world of blame, manipulation, and perpetual crisis. On the other side was mine, a world of peace, of purpose, of my own making. And there would be no crossing that line, ever again. For the first time in my life, I didn't back down. I chose myself over their approval. I chose my peace over their drama. This was a massive moment. If you support this powerful decision, drop a flexed bicep emoji in the comments to send some strength her way on this journey. That support, even just knowing it's out there, is exactly what you need when you're rebuilding your life from the ground up. The silence that followed these final, decisive actions was profound. It wasn't an empty silence. It was full silence. A silence filled with possibility, with freedom, with the exhilarating, terrifying prospect of a future that was entirely my own. But in that vast, quiet space, a single thought surfaced. I didn't want to be alone right now. I picked up the phone and dialed a number that had become my true lifeline over the years. "Diana?" I said, my voice a little unsteady for the first time that day. "It's Ava. Are you free? My family just left, and I could really use a friend." There was no hesitation on the other end of the line, no questions, no judgment. Just a warm, steady voice that was the antithesis of everything I had just endured. "I'm on my way," she said. "Don't move. I'll bring wine." Diana arrived in less than 30 minutes, a bottle of expensive Cabernet in one hand and a look of fierce, unwavering support in her eyes. She found me in the garden, sitting on a stone bench I had dedicated to my grandmother Helen. She didn't say a word. She just sat down beside me, poured 2 glasses of wine, and waited. And so, I told her everything. The whole, sordid, ugly story. From the moment I saw them on the security camera to the final, pathetic pleas, I recounted their demands, their accusations, their transparently manipulative tactics. And she just listened, her presence a solid, comforting anchor in the turbulent, emotional sea I was navigating. When I finished, a single tear escaping and tracing a path down my cheek, Diana didn't offer empty platitudes. She didn't say, "I'm sure they didn't mean it," or, "But they're still your family." She just shook her head, a look of quiet fury in her eyes. "The audacity," she said, her voice a low growl. $2 million and shares, the sheer, unmitigated audacity. Her righteous anger on my behalf was more comforting than any hug could ever be. She saw it. She got it. She understood that this wasn't just about money. It was about a lifetime of being treated as less than, of being a resource to be tapped, not a person to be loved. "You did the right thing, Ava," she said, her hand finding mine. "The brave thing. You chose you." We sat there for a long time, sipping our wine as the sun began to set, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple. The silence between us was comfortable, easy. A silence built on years of mutual respect and genuine affection. This was what it felt like. This was family. The next morning, I walked into my office at Secure Now, and the energy was electric. We had just landed a massive new contract, a deal that would propel us into the next stratosphere of the tech world. My team was buzzing, a hive of brilliant, passionate people all working towards a common goal. Layla, my CTO, pulled me aside, a huge grin on her face. "We did it, boss," she said, her eyes shining with pride. "We actually did it. We, not you. We." In that moment, surrounded by the people who had stood by me, who had believed in my vision when it was just a crazy idea sketched on a napkin, who had worked tirelessly to help me build this empire, I felt a sense of belonging that was more real, more profound, than anything I had ever felt in the house I grew up in. There was Travis, my first investor, who had taken a chance on me when 27 others had said no. He was more than an investor now. He was a mentor, a friend, a weekend sailing buddy who delighted in telling everyone the story of how he discovered me bartending. There was my executive team, Layla, Marcus, and Derek. We had been in the trenches together, celebrated victories, and weathered storms. They weren't just my employees. They were my confidants, my war council. And then there were the others. The quiet, everyday connections that had woven themselves into the fabric of my new life. My former roommate, Jordan, now a literature professor at Stanford, met me for coffee once a month to talk about books and life. The baristas at my favorite coffee shop knew my order by heart. Even my lawyer, a stern, no-nonsense woman who, after hearing a brief, sanitized version of my family history, had looked at me with a newfound respect and said, "Good for you. Don't let the bastards grind you down." These were the people who showed up. The people who celebrated my successes without a hint of jealousy. The people who offered support without wanting anything in return. They were the ones who saw me, the real me, not the role I was supposed to play in someone else's dysfunctional drama. That night, after the longest, most emotionally draining day of my life, I didn't go home to an empty mansion. I went home and called Diana and her husband, and Travis and his wife, and Layla and her partner. "I'm ordering pizza," I said, "and I'm opening the good stuff. Get over here." And they came. They filled my beautiful, once silent house with laughter, with conversation, with life. As I looked around at these people, my chosen family, gathered in my kitchen, arguing about pineapple on pizza and celebrating our shared victory, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. A peace that was deep and true and unshakable. The family that had been defined by my absence had been replaced by a family defined by their presence. And in that moment, I knew, with every fiber of my being, that I was finally home. A year has passed since that day, a year of quiet, uninterrupted peace. The change wasn't dramatic or explosive. It was a slow, steady dawn after a long night. My life is fuller now than I ever thought possible, but it's not because of the money or the success. It's because I finally cleared out the toxic clutter and made space for what truly matters. I poured my energy and a significant portion of my fortune into creating the Helen Grace Foundation, named after my grandmother. It's a nonprofit dedicated to supporting kids aging out of the foster care system, providing them with the resources, mentorship, and financial literacy they need to build their own lives. Every thank you letter I receive from one of those kids, every success story I hear, that's my real fortune. That's the legacy that matters. My house is no longer a silent fortress. It's a home, filled with the laughter and chaotic energy of my chosen family. We have Sunday dinners, holiday parties, and impromptu movie nights. It's everything I ever wanted a family to be, built on a foundation of respect and genuine affection, not obligation and blood. As for my biological family, the consequences of their actions finally caught up with them. Without my $2 million bailout, my father's business collapsed completely. They had to sell the house I grew up in, the house with the white picket fence and the ghost of a golden retriever. They downsized to a small condo, a tangible symbol of their diminished status. My mother, stripped of her social standing, had to face a reality that wasn't curated for the neighbors. The biggest change was in my brother Ethan. Without the safety net of our parents' money, the golden boy was finally forced to grow up. The divorce was finalized, and reality hit him hard. He had to get a real job, a 9-to-5 sales gig to pay child support. He had to learn how to cook for himself, how to manage a budget, and how to be a responsible adult. The world, it turned out, wasn't going to hand him everything on a silver platter. About 6 months ago, I received an email. The subject line simply said, "From Ethan." I almost deleted it, but something made me open it. It wasn't a plea for money. It wasn't an accusation. It was an apology. A real one. He wrote about how losing everything had forced him to see the world and his own life clearly for the first time. He acknowledged the unfairness, the privilege he had always taken for granted. He said he was sorry. Not just for what happened that day at my house, but for a lifetime of indifference. He didn't ask for anything. He just said he hoped that one day his kids could get to know their aunt. I read the email several times. I didn't feel a rush of forgiveness, but I didn't feel anger either. I felt a quiet sense of closure. I replied with a short, simple message. I told him I appreciated his words and that I wished him well. I said that when the time was right, perhaps we could talk about the kids. The door wasn't closed, but it wasn't wide open either. It was ajar, with a heavy chain lock still in place. A new relationship, if there was to be one, would be on my terms, with my boundaries. This whole journey, from the forgotten little girl in the corner to the woman I am today, has taught me one profound, unshakable truth. Your worth is not determined by those who fail to see it. For so long I thought that if I just tried harder, achieved more, and became more successful, they would finally love me. But I was wrong. Their inability to love me was their failure, not mine. True family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up, who lifts you, who sees your spark, even when you can't see it yourself. Family is a choice, and I finally chose mine. So now I want to ask you, have you ever had to set a difficult boundary with a family member who took you for granted? How did you navigate that painful conversation? Let's talk about it. Share your experience in the comments below, And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding your voice. Thank you for being a part of this journey with me. And remember, sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones we build ourselves.